Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. This is the business of sports.
The business of sports can be intimidating or hard for a starter to break into.
We really appreciate when our owners are actually there, with us through the journey.
Teams, ours especially, have been very intentional to diversify at all levels of the company.
I think we're in the golden years for the NFL and college football.
Our demographic reach has continued to expand.
This is going to be really unlocking the streaming platform for sports fans.
Sports valuations are rising. We'll see when they peak.
You don't have to be the best in your sport to make a whole ton of money.
Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr.
And I'm Vanessa Perdomo.
Damian Zasauer is off this week. Coming up today, we are wrapping up the 2026 Milan Cortina Winter Olympics.
And Michael, there have been some amazing stories out of Italy so far, like U.S. bobsledder Ilana Myers-Taylor, who won her first gold medal at 41 years old after competing in 5 Olympics, and U.S. alpine ski legend Mikaela Shiffrin won her first gold medal in the slalom since her debut in 2014. That gives her 3 gold medals, and she now holds the record for most gold medals in U.S. alpine ski history.
Well, guess what? We just so happened to speak with the CEO of USA Bobsled and Skeleton, Aron McGuire, right before he headed out to Milan. We'll listen into that conversation on the way. But we will start with skiing, Vanessa. You got a chance to sit down with the president and CEO of US Ski and Snowboard, Sophie Goldschmidt.
That's right, Michael. They've had a great year, and Sophie's telling us how they're going to keep the momentum going.
Huddle around the set, gang. Let's listen to a portion of the conversation now. It's Vanessa with Sophie Goldschmidt, President and CEO of U.S. Ski and Snowboard.
So, Sophie, if, as the games are wrapping up, can you tell us, how would you categorize this time in Milan Cortina and these games as a whole?
I would say it's been an amazing experience, very exciting, a few twists and turns, but yeah, overall very proud of how our team and athletes have been performing. And look, we've got a few days left, so hoping for a strong finish as well.
When you're looking at how the different countries and how everyone hosts these games differently, how have these been in particular, and how would you say when we're looking ahead to a few cycles from now in 2034, what does Salt Lake City have to hold up to?
Yeah, I think, look, the Italian spirit and just their passion for sport has definitely come through. We knew going into these games logistically it was going to be more of a challenge than we've encountered in a long time, just because of the number of different locations. But that was coming off a Beijing Olympics, which, had its own sort of situation and things to deal with, given that it was, during COVID and not necessarily a location that a lot of our teams have competed in before. And that was my first Winter Olympics, and I just started sort of a few weeks before. So I was very much in a sort of steep learning curve there. So I think coming into this games, we definitely had more of what I might say sort of a normal preparation because there weren't the same restrictions that there were leading up to 2022. But the fact that, we oversee 10 different sports across Olympics and Paralympics, and close to 100 athletes competing in this games, brought different complexities. I've done a lot of miles on the road, just trying to see as many of our athletes and teams compete, and being so spread out has definitely brought some challenges. But look, I have to give them credit. I think the venues themselves, most importantly, the athletic kind of venues, the surfaces that the athletes have been competing on, whether it's the different features around slopestyle, big air, the half pipes, the alpine venue, cross country, etc. I think they've done a really good job with those. I think the rest of the infrastructure has been sort of a work in progress. I would say it's got sort of better and better as the games has continued. But overall, I think for the most part, it's been a really positive experience, both, most importantly for the athletes, but also all the other stakeholders that are involved in putting the games on.
Absolutely. And obviously, before, we move on to exciting things and talking about everything that's happened, I want to address, what happened with legendary skier Lindsey Vonn and her crash. And obviously, we've seen that she's back in the U.S. She's recovering, which is great to hear. But what else can you tell us about, Lindsey's recovery?
Yeah, look, it was an incredibly tough start to the games with the horrific injury that she went through. It was day 2, I guess. Well, depending when the game starts, but the first Sunday of the games, and we'd had Breezy Johnson put down just an incredible run in the downhill. Lindsey was going just a few races after her, and I think I was at the bottom, so got a slightly different perspective, but you could tell right away that it was a very serious injury. And I think it impacted everyone, obviously in different ways, the athletes, the spectators there, those seeing on TV that probably even experienced more of it just because of, what the broadcast can show. But, I think the way she sort of presented herself, how she's communicated since then, just sort of epitomizes the champion and role model that she is. As we now all know, it's a very serious injury. Good news is she's back in the States. She had sort of the first major surgery back there yesterday. She had to have a few surgeries just to be able to get back to the US, but her spirit and strength of character and just, sort of having no regrets and giving it her all to be ready for that race, and how she's dealing with sort of what happened is really, I find, very inspiring. I was fortunate to have the chance to see her a couple of times before she left Italy, and it was, quite incredible to see how she's been managing it. So, look, she's got a long road to recovery, but she's been injured seriously several times before. So I think she knows what it's going to take. But, you can't help but feel just, very sad for her that this happened, because what she's done to get back to this position, to be leading the downhill and to be the best speed athlete, in Alpine at the moment, at 41 years of age, is quite an accomplishment. But I think she's managed it as well as she could have done.
Absolutely. We're speaking with Sophie Goldschmidt, U.S. Ski and Snowboard President and CEO. Sophie, one of the other things that you had said earlier that I really wanted to touch on was the amount of sports you guys have competing in the games. I feel like you're in charge of essentially half the events that take place at the Winter Games. Tell me about that, and are there challenges to the amount of events that you guys have, the amount of disciplines and all of those things, and how has your games been trying to get to all those different kinds of things?
Yeah, look, it's part of what I love about our job. It's very exciting. I mean, just when something maybe isn't going as planned, there's something else going in another area that kind of keeps you on your toes. I mean, it certainly means that I'm constantly learning, which I love. Having worked in sports for a long time, hopefully also my experience continues to kick in, and we can add value in different areas. But I love the variety. I mean, look, there's, I think, so many similarities across our sports, which I think really benefit each other. People tend to just focus on the differences, and clearly from a technical standpoint, turning in, a slalom race is very different to doing, an incredible trick and jump in a half pipe. Mm-hmm. But when you think about the mental preparation, the physical preparation, the nutrition, the team, the culture, all of that, there are significant similarities that I think can really benefit all of our sports. And then you need, the specialism and sort of specifics in certain areas as well. But I love the fact that we have, multiple different sports, and within those sports, multiple disciplines. And, it's a big reason I took on this role. And I think, we're thinking more and more like one team. We're trying to lean into those similarities. We've made our USANA Center of Excellence much more of a hub for all of our athletes to come and train during the off season and prep period, because I think, they can all inspire each other in so many ways, even if their seasons and events are quite different. If you've been training with someone in the summer, lifting the same weights, going through the same training routine, and maybe you're struggling, but you see them pop through and have a great result, you never know what's going to be that spark that can inspire someone. So I think, hopefully it can continue to give us an advantage. I think culturally, I feel like we're in a really good place. We're certainly not complacent. We've got a long way to go, both culturally and on the performance side. While we've got some amazing, very established, proven champions, I feel like in some other areas we're only just getting going, and that certainly is very motivating for me.
Sophie, how much of your job is about, these elite athletes and, the Olympic style national team, and then how much of it is looking at growing the participation across the national level and that sort of youth level and all of that?
Yeah, I would say it's sort of multifaceted. We've got various different areas and levels within our organization. Sort of most simplistically sort of explained, we have the on snow and off snow. So on snow is everything to do with our athletes, and that's from overseeing the programming and management of the best athletes in the world. We oversee now about 250 athletes across our 10 different sports. So sort of from a full-time training and competition perspective, we're managing all of that with their coaching, competitive side of things, the preparation period. And then the off snow is more about sort of generating the revenue and awareness. So from a commercial standpoint, the partnership side of it, the growing our broadcast, growing the media presence, we generate a lot of revenue also through philanthropy, which is a really important revenue stream for us, given, unlike basically all of our counterparts around the world who receive significant funding from the government, in the US we get no funding. So we're, more reliant on all these other revenue sources. And ultimately, I see it as a very holistic circle. We're supporting the top of the pyramid and also sort of the base. The better our athletes do at the top in Olympic Games, Paralympic Games, in World Cups, World Champions, etc. I think that provides inspiration and kind of lights the fire for more people to want to engage in our sports at a participation level. And the stronger the participation base is, the more talent we get in our pipeline, which means we're more likely to produce champions. So it really is a very holistic circle.
That was Sophie Goldschmidt. She's the CEO and president of US Ski and Snowboard.
Up next, we speak with the CEO of USA Bobsled and Skeleton. That is straight ahead on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. For Vanessa Perdomo, I'm Michael Barr. You are listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr.
And I'm Vanessa Perdomo.
Damian Sassower is off this week. We're focused on the Olympics today as the games wrap up in Milan.
Michael, you, Damian, and I spoke with the CEO of USA Bobsled and Skeleton, Aron McGuire, right before he headed out to the games. So none of the medals had been won yet, but Aron explained to us how they find these incredible athletes because, shockingly enough, but really not, they don't start out doing this at a very young age.
Let's dive right into the conversation with the CEO of USA Bobsled and Skeleton, Aron McGuire. You are in a sport where it takes money to get athletes to participate in this. Tell us about that and how you generate money so that the USA team can just go and kick butt.
You're right. It is not, the sports of bobsled and skeleton are not inexpensive. You think about the cost of sports, and a lot of people think of Formula One as one of the most expensive sports that's out there. You're talking about multi-million dollar budgets per team. then you start thinking about sports like equestrian, where you have $1 million horses, and not far behind are the sports of bobsled and skeleton, and the equipment alone is pricey. A four-man bobsled costs $125,000 or more. We're shipping equipment from the United States to Europe every year. The sports are primarily European based. We do host events in the United States, in Lake Placid, New York, in Park City, Utah, where the two Olympic Games were hosted. In 2034, we've got the Games returning to Utah, so we're certainly excited about that.
Aron, when you're looking at donors and sponsors and things, how hard is it for bobsled and skeleton to get into that conversation? I mean, it's really unique, it's really nimble, and it's not a sport that a lot of people, watch outside of the games. So can you talk a little bit about what you have to do in order to get those sponsors?
Well, the great things about the sports of bobsled and skeleton is people don't realize it, but they can relate to it. And we've all, most people have been kids. We've all been kids at one point, but most people have grown up and been around snow at some point in their lives. And so they've been sledding. And everybody can relate to that experience of being a kid and going down the hill and snow flying in their face and going a little too fast and getting that adrenaline going. And that's essentially what bobsled and skeleton are. But you're going 90 miles an hour down a mile-long track at close, at top speeds with 4 and 5 Gs. And so connecting with that memory of being a kid and the sport, that's really the first step. The second step is making that connection to the USA team and knowing that there's a lot of pride and honor for our athletes to wear a uniform that says USA, and that's red, white, and blue. We're a divided country in many ways, but the one thing that everybody can get behind, that's the USA team. And so that does get people excited and interested. And then finally, really recognizing the impact that our sponsors and donors make on the team, not just financially, but within, expertise. We work with a number of tech partners, technology partners that are helping us design and build bobsleds that are competitive against the Germans and the Swiss and the Canadians.
Well, Aron, you actually took me right there. And, when you started this conversation, you kind of compared, bobsledding to F1, right? And in F1, we all know that, there are cars involved. In this case, you have a steel chassis, carbon fiber, kind of skeleton, or, some steel frame fiberglass, bobsled. I mean, I don't know. Does, the technology that goes into the actual sled itself factor in? I mean, do people have better sleds than other sleds? I mean, does it really matter?
Absolutely. And so I'll say in bobsled and skeleton, there's three main factors that it takes to win a race. First of all, you have to have a great start. And so we're recruiting athletes from other sports. Most athletes have never touched a bobsled or skeleton sled until their early 20s. Most athletes have run track and field. They've played football. They've run they've played soccer or softball or baseball. They're athletes, and they get into the sport, and we teach them how the sports work. So the push is really incredible. We're looking for big, fast, explosive athletes that aren't afraid to go down a track at top speeds. Number two, it takes a great pilot. Just like Formula One, you've got to be able to steer, get down the track. And the last piece is equipment. And so the International Federation sets rules and regulations of how big the sled can be, how small the sled can be, certain aerodynamic aspects, certain aspects with the steering. But there is leeway for countries to go in and design and build their own sleds. And so that's something that we have had a great history of doing for a number of years, getting back to the 90s with a NASCAR driver named Jeff Bodine, who got in the sport, and then moving into working with BMW, and now we're working with partners like Debotech, Advance, Honda, who are all really lending their expertise to help us be successful and build fast sleds for the athletes.
We're talking with Aron McGuire, CEO of USA Bobsled and Skeleton. For the audience, very quickly, if you're not familiar with the sport of skeleton, bobsledding, and the luge, to explain. The bobsled, of course, you are 2 to 4 men inside a compartment as you're going down a track. The luge, you're on your back with just blades on you, but your feet first. The skeleton is, now you talk about brave, is that you are head first on your stomach and you are flying at 90 miles an hour. You were right about being brave at doing this, but it brings up a point, and it's been in the news now, lots of sports. It's about Katie Ulander, the Olympic skeleton spot. She apparently is not going to be on the USA team because Canada had withdrawn from the team competition, I think, in Lake Placid earlier. And that meant it brought down the scoring, and it's a whole kind of mess. Can you bring us up to date on that?
Sure. So Katie Ulanders is a multi-Olympian. She's been in the sport of skeleton for, 20 years or more. And so she was racing in a lower circuit. So we have two circuits. We have the World Cup circuit, which is competitions both in North America, Europe, and occasionally Asia. And those are all of our essentially most competitive teams are racing there. Katie was competing on a lower circuit, which was in North America in Lake Placid. And you earn points throughout the season based on where you race. And so while there are lower points available within the North American Cup circuit, it gave her an opportunity to earn points, win the race. Unfortunately, Canada withdrew some athletes, which ended up reducing the number of points that she received, along with a few other countries. And so as a result of that, she finished up as our third U.S. women's skeleton athlete. U.S. earned 2 quota spots, so she unfortunately did not finish in the top 2, and we did have 2 other athletes who did finish in the top 2 who will be representing the United States. Certainly, there's a big push for her to be entered into the games, and we're looking into it. The U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee has put requests in, and for us, we don't want to displace another athlete for her because it's a complex situation, and so our hope is that there's an opportunity for an additional quota spot to be allocated to the U.S. team, so that way we can take our top 3 U.S. women's skeleton athletes to the games.
Wow, really interesting. Hopefully, that goes. I mean, it's coming up soon. Let's talk a little bit more about the athletes on Team USA. I mean, you brought it up a little bit about how they get into bobsledding. I mean, they come from different sports. Can you talk a little bit how you find these explosive athletes and really how they, train for the sport? I mean, how often are they training outside of the games? Do they have outside jobs, like a lot of Olympians have to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the athletes that we have on the team, we've got a very diverse group of athletes because they don't necessarily come from one region of the United States. They come from all over the country, from New York to Florida to Texas to California and every state in between, because we're looking for athletes from other sports to come into the sport of bobsled and skeleton. What we will do is we'll visit about 8 cities during the summer and host tryouts, combines. And during those combines, we test athletes' sprinting ability, standing long jump, vertical jump. We interview them to really get an understanding of what kind of athlete they are. And from there, we can see whether those athletes would have the aptitude, the athleticism to push a 400-pound sled at the start of a race. Once we've identified our top athletes from those recruiting camps, those combines, we invite them out to Lake Placid, to the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center, where we spend a week with that kind of rookie camp or rookie class, teaching them how the sports of bobsled and skeleton work. Now, what we'll typically do is there are bobsleds on wheels that are at each of the tracks that we can actually do a bobsled race or a bobsled run in the summertime. Because not only do we want athletic people, but we want people that like a little bit of adrenaline. And so we'll take them down the track, and we have some athletes that say, that was an amazing rush. I loved it. How do I get back to the top of the track and do it again? And we've got some athletes that despite being amazingly athletic, They take one run. They say, how can I get to the airport to go home as quickly as possible? It's just not for them. And so we're looking for two boxes to be checked. One is that they're excited, passionate, athletic, and two is that they love that adrenaline rush. And so our athletes do train back in their hometowns. So during the summer, it's a decentralized program. They're training at home. They're primarily working on speed and strength training to get bigger, faster, stronger in the off season. And then around July, what we'll do is we'll start hosting team training camps in Lake Placid, New York, occasionally Park City, Utah, to really start focusing on sport-specific technique of pushing sleds, of getting into a sled. As you can imagine, four guys that are all 220 pounds, 230 pounds, going in a full sprint and jumping into, a small bobsled in less than a second. It takes practice and it takes training to get it right.
That was Aron McGuire. He is the CEO of USA Bobsled and Skeleton.
Up next, we continue to focus on the Winter Games and talk hockey.
We'll check in with former Canadian star Jayna Hefford and talk about her work on the new North American Women's Ice Hockey League.
Ooh, that's straight ahead on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. I'm Michael Barr with Vanessa Perdomo. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr.
And I'm Vanessa Perdomo. Damian Sassower is out this week.
We're focusing on the Winter Olympics on the show today, and as the games wrap up in Milan, we want to take a look at what's ahead for some of the sports, including women's professional ice hockey. By the way, the women's hockey team, they won the gold in thrilling fashion, defeating Canada 2-1 in overtime, which leads us to our next conversation in this Olympic special.
We spoke with Amy Scheer. She's the Executive Vice President of Business Operations for the Professional Women's Hockey League, and Jayna Hefford, Executive Vice President for the PWHL, who also happens to be a 4-time Olympic gold medalist. We talked with them right before the games kicked off about how the league can capitalize on the momentum of the Winter Olympics when the athletes come back to North America to compete.
Let's listen to that conversation now. You guys are involved in the Professional Women's Hockey League in its 3rd season. I'm going to start with you, Amy. Tell us about how the league is going so far.
Oh, we're doing great this season. Things are looking good. Our attendance is up. Our merchandise sales are up. We've got a record number of sponsors. Fans are bringing signs that are better than ever and more creative. So we're feeling good about season 3 so far.
And Amy, this is the first, this is the 3rd season, but the first time you guys are around for the Olympic cycle. Tell us about how you guys are, what the strategy is there, building off the momentum going into the games and coming out of the games.
Well, this is a huge opportunity for us because it's the first time for the PWHL that we've had an Olympic cycle. And so we're making sure that all of our verticals across the board are taking advantage of this. So we've got a big campaign that we're launching called the Ultimate Away Game. And we're showcasing all of our athletes now on the global stage. And we've got a hub on our website that's just all about the Olympics and the Ultimate Away Game. We are airing spots on linear and social streams for both the U.S. and Canada. So we'll be producing a ton of content coming out of Milan, both live and taped. We'll have watch parties back at home with our teams. And so we've got tons of merch in and around the games for our players and for our fans. And so we're pretty excited to put all of our efforts into the Olympics, and then coming out the back end, hope there's a nice sort of draft and a tailwind to help really continue to propel the PWHL.
Jane, I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit. There are 10 women's ice hockey teams in the Olympics this year. And I mean, from what I'm hearing, a lot of those teams have the PWHL players on them. I'm sure Canada and the US, but what other teams out there, have players on their teams?
Well, we have great representation at the Olympic Games. There'll be 61 PWHL players, which represents about 30% of our league. Again, predominantly Canada and the US, but we also have 8 players on Czechia, which is a significant number. And then across Sweden, Finland, Germany, Italy, there's another handful to get to that 61 number. And in addition to that, we have a number of staff members that will be head coaches in the Olympic Games representing their countries as well, and other support staff. So definitely something we're incredibly proud of.
We're talking with Amy Scheer, Executive Vice President of Business Operations for the PWHL, and Jayna Hefford, Executive Vice President of Hockey Operations for the PWHL. And I want to talk about the central ownership by the Mark Walter Group and the advisory group, which includes Billie Jean King. Jayna, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, we obviously feel very fortunate to have a leadership group and an ownership group in Mark and Kimbra Walter, Stan Kasten, Billie Jean King, Alana Kloss, who have been, leaders in all levels of sport, and certainly Billie Jean and Alana on the women's sports side, and Stan and Mark have had an incredible amount of success everywhere they've been. So, to launch a league like we've done in a short period of time and have the success we've had is certainly, I think, a recognition of that support and that leadership at the top, and just feel fortunate that, Amy and I and the rest of the team get to work alongside them and strategize how we grow this league, because the early success has been incredible, and looking forward to lots of great things ahead.
Amy, it's interesting, obviously, like as Jayna was saying, the early success, and it really is, right? I mean, 3 years into the league and you're already, it feels like shattering your own attendance record like every other, month or something, like constantly playing in front of like crowds, sold out 15,000 to 17,000, and then coming out of the games, you'll be playing at MSG and TD Garden. How has the league been able to capture this audience so quickly? Because women's ice hockey, I mean, it's not new, right? It's been around for a long time. Jayna played in a lot of leagues for a while in her career. How come this particular, group is able to succeed so quickly?
Yeah, I think Jayna touched on it a little bit with ownership, right? I think we are the first, I know we are the first women's hockey league to have the right resources. And I think the fans appreciate that. And so, number one, they appreciate, I think, the position that the players are in now, where they're playing in top-notch facilities. They have medical, health insurance, real pay. And so the players are supported, and they put on the most amazing show every night. So every game you come to, the level of play is out of this world. And then on the business side, we've been able to support the players with best-in-class staff. And so if you look at the leadership team across the PWHL, we've got amazing, talented and skilled individuals that are able to promote and market and really build this league. And it's time. It's generational change. And I think when you look at people now, 30, 35 years old, they don't know a world without women's sports. And so this is really, I think, for them pretty typical, and it's accepted. And it's time. So I think it's a lot of things. I think it's resource. I think it's staffing. And it's fans. They appreciate what we're doing.
Well, Amy, I love it that Vanessa points out that the PWHL is coming to MSG, that it's coming to New York, because you yourself spent quite a bit of time in the tri-state area, first with the Nets, then the Liberty. I believe you were with NYCFC for a while, and then the Connecticut Sun. Talk to us about the importance of playing at MSG.
Well, it's called the world's most famous arena for a reason. And it is the most magical place if you are an athlete to play. And it was really important for us as a league in this market to play at the world's most famous arena. I think it really shows that we're real, we're legitimate. It took me 2 years to get the game there, right? It's so hard to get a date at MSG. But for us, this is about brand building, audience building, continuing the legitimacy of what the PWHL is and what we stand for, which is best in class. And so we're excited, and we feel pretty confident that this game is going to sell out. And we're 3/4 of the way there already.
Well, old man Barr is a very selfish person from the fact that I want you guys more on TV. More TV, please. So, Jayna, what can the league do to set up more deals for streaming and television? Can you take us more through that?
Yeah, I think Amy could probably comment further on that. But I think in general, we've talked about the Olympics already. What a great opportunity that is to draw new eyeballs to women's hockey. We're still a relatively young sport and an emerging sport. And The Olympic Games has a high level of visibility around the world. So we want to take advantage of that. And there's still many people that haven't seen the highest level of women's hockey yet. And when they do, I think, they want to figure out where the next game is. So, that's one big part of it. I think continuing to storytell around our athletes. We have these incredible women that are successful in so many different aspects of their life, that are incredible athletes and ambassadors and role models. And so we want to continue to tell their stories because we know fans fall in love with them as well. And so, I think it continues to come back to visibility, and that's incredibly important for us.
Jayna, Amy, do you guys work really closely with the NHL? And the reason I ask is if you look at the WNBA as a peer, they have a lot of, and again, I don't know the ownership structure there. I mean, I know it's centrally owned by the Mark Walter Group, but a lot of WNBA teams are owned by NBA franchises. That can be a good and a bad thing. And I'm just curious if you've explored something similar, with the PWHL and doing any sort of affiliation with the Men's National Hockey League.
Well, I think on the business side, and Jayna could talk to the hockey side. On the business side, we have a wonderful relationship with the NHL. We talk to them on a fairly frequent basis, whether it's how do we maximize the Olympics together, if they're having an all-star weekend, how do we take part in that? Right. As we look to spin up different parts of our business, we'll call them and ask them their thoughts on things. And so we've got a wonderful working relationship with them on the business side where we continue to work together on a ton of different programs and a ton of different things. So that's where it'll stay. There's no discussions of the NHL buying or investing in the PWHL. Again, that's Mark Walter and Kimber Walter. But from a business perspective, really positive working relationship. We couldn't ask for a better partner in working with us on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I would echo that on the hockey side as well. Just great partners in so many different ways, and we share a lot of facilities, and there's infrastructure there that has been great for our success in terms of getting our players into professional buildings and have the support and the resources they require. So, to echo Amy, I think the NHL have been great partners and continue to work alongside us.
Well, alongside that, as we were talking about earlier, when you're talking about, sharing infrastructure and things like that and resources that Amy had mentioned earlier, Jayna, can you talk a little bit about just how your career, how that was for you? I mean, you had such a successful career. I'm not going to, sit here and list, your accolades are really strong, but we'll make sure, everybody knows, Hockey Hall of Fame and all that. But for you, what was that like for you at the time when you were playing and getting ready for the Olympic Games and all of that? Was it anything like it is today, or you really had to kind of stay ready on your own?
Yeah, it was nothing like it is today. And, we were responsible, in those 3 years in between Olympic Games to find somewhere to play. And it, at that time, was not a professional league. It was very much the best players in the world, but in many cases, players still paying to play and having, late night practices and jobs during the week and then play on weekends. And the passion to represent your country was the same, and the competition, the intensity of that was the same. But now to see the landscape and how it's changed and the way our players are supported year round, day in, day out. And I think, you don't have to look very far to see that the best players in the world that are potentially on the backside of their careers are still getting better now because of the support that they have. So players like Hilary Knight and Marie-Philippe Poulin have been legends in the game for a long time, but we're seeing them have some of their best seasons because they're supported in such a different way.
That was Amy Scheer, Executive Vice President for Business Operations for the PWHL, and four-time Olympic gold medalist Jayna Hefford, Executive Vice President of Hockey Operations for the PWHL.
And that's it for today. Thanks for joining us. Tune in again next week for the latest on the stories moving big old money in the world of sports.
And don't forget to catch our podcast on all your podcast platforms and go to Bloomberg.com to subscribe to the Bloomberg Business of Sports newsletter to stay up to date on all our juicy insights.
Juicy! You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.